Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, Into the Thyverse, Paxman on the red carpet. The reality show was a big hit, streaming on screens all across the world. The engines were all pretty annoyed by this. "That's all the passengers ever seemed to bring up," grumbled Robert, "that I was the engine that was on the reality TV show and ruined those lousy cakes." "More fame than most of us could ever get," Cormac chuckled. "Most of us just seem to blend into the background. Take Paxman, for example." Cormac and Robert eyed the resting diesel engine. Paxman woke, feeling all the eyes on him. Can I help you two?" he asked anxiously. "No," Cormac replied. "Just using you as an example." "For what?" Paxman asked. "Engines who just blend into the background," Cormac explained. "You have to admit, you've never really done anything too eventful with yourself." Paxman considered the case. "I suppose so," he said at last, "and I'm kind of glad. I don't want to be some pompous git like Gordon or Robert." "What cheek!" snapped Robert, as Paxman purred away. The next morning, however, things were to change. The Fat Controller addressed his engines seriously. "The Railway Board has offered the stars of the reality show their own special tour train," he said. "Due to the popularity of the show, we'll be making it a special occasion, with a red carpet event right behind the works." "Who will be taking the train?" Cedric asked. "The board requested Robert specifically," the Fat Controller replied, "since he appeared on the show. They wanted Donald to double-head the service, but I need him here, so Jack can keep Jesse at bay." Robert was pleased, somewhat. He loved the idea of a special train, but he hated the idea of those people getting their own red carpet event. "I'll do my best, sir," Robert said, smiling. "Besides, what could go wrong?" Down the line, there was trouble. Paxman had been feeling unwell. He struggled onto the centre station, but try as he might, he couldn't go on any further.
"You're due for some bloody good maintenance," huffed his driver. "No wonder with how hard you've been working."
"Doesn't pay to blend into the background, huh?" Paxman joked. His crew didn't find this situation very funny. They quickly phoned ahead, and Colin soon arrived to take Paxman away to be mended. The big day came. The big station was swarmed with people, all trying to get a good look at their new celebrity crushes. The stars all flounced happily into the coaches, waving and blowing kisses at miners in the crowd. Robert grew nervous. "Something's bound to go wrong," his stoker said, remembering her own experience on set.
"It always does," replied the driver, "but we cannot stop that, eh?"
"Yes," Robert interjected. "But what?"
"I guess we'll find out,"
remarked the stoker, as the guard blew her whistle. Robert took a deep breath and slowly puffed away. The journey went, for the most half, uneventfully. As they puffed along, Robert thought he could hear loud arguments coming from the coaches. "What's going on back there?" he pondered, but he had no time to dwell on it, as he was distracted by how many people were dotted by the line side. It was all too much for Robert. He relished in all the attention, but this seemed too much for him. At last, Robert puffed into the crowded workstation. Police had to control the crowds as the passengers fussed around the stars. They quickly disappeared once the stars were out of sight, behind the works building. "Right," Robert said, sighing with relief. "No issues then."
"No such luck,"
grunted the driver.
"Look at the state of young coaches."
Sure enough, when Robert's crew and the station master inspected the coach, they found it completely torn to shreds. "Cinders and ashes!" Robert cried. "When did that happen?" The station master phoned the works owner and told them the news.
"They said they can have the coach mended by the following day," she explained. "Please shunt them away into the works shed."
So, Robert did. Or so he thought. No one had bothered to mention Paxman. Paxman had been sleeping, but had been awoken by the fuss the crowd was making outside. "Phew," he said groggily. "Loud lot they are." Then he heard something. It sounded like puffing and the rattle of wheels on the rails. What's going on back there? Suddenly, Paxman was jolted forward. What's going on? He cried. The wall came closer and closer. It hadn't been built to stop engines, but in that moment, Paxman wished it was. Paxman shut his eyes and braced for the crash. He burst through the brick wall, showering the area around him in brick dust, only then coming to a stop. When Paxman opened his eyes, he found himself face to face with television people, all staring at him agape. "Am I a special guest?" he quipped. You see, the thing that had pushed Paxman was Robert. The workman hadn't switched the points, and Robert had shunted Paxman right through the brick wall. "You ruined our interview!" shrieked one of the stars, and before Paxman could even say, "Fat controller," all the attention was on him. And not in a good way. They all shouted and swore and told him what a bad engine he was. Paxman was riddled with anxiety. He didn't know what to say. Thankfully, a workman had noticed their mistake and quickly ordered Robert to pull Paxman clear of the set. He was. Robert didn't say anything, but Paxman knew Robert felt just as embarrassed as he did. The next day, Paxman was being mended when Donald came chuffing in. Once he had come to a stop, the fat controller hopped out, clutching a newspaper in one hand. "It seems we cannot get away from the spotlight," Donald joked. Paxman looked puzzledly at the newspaper before he read the headline. "Sudrian locomotive interrupts live interview, sends crowd into uproar," the fat controller read. Paxman blushed. "I didn't mean to, sir. Honest." "Accidents happen," laughed the fat controller. "If anyone asks, you got a firm telling off." "Truthfully," added Donald, "some of the others seem a wee bit jealous." Paxman grimaced in reply. Paxman is still the same nervous but quiet diesel engine, and I doubt that could ever change. But that day, Paxman learned a very valuable lesson. "It's no fun being in the spotlight," he thought to himself.